Welcome to the Business Owners Council, Legal Issues from Growth to Exit.
Hello and welcome back to the Business Owners Council, Legal Issues from Growth to Exit. Each week, I sit down with Kevin Brick, founder of Brick Business Law and trusted advisor to Florida companies, to talk through the strategies business owners need to grow, protect, and maximize the value of their businesses. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're looking at how businesses can use outside general counsel. Many owners wait until there's a lawsuit before calling a lawyer, but Kevin works with companies in a very different way, as an ongoing advisor who helps prevent disputes and spot issues early. Kevin, welcome back.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Last episode we talked about the need for having a lawyer to go over contracts. Now we're going to kind of expand on that a little bit. What does working with outside general counsel look like from a business owner's perspective in a larger sense?
Well, I'll tell you what we think it should look like. It should be like, in the nature of a trusted, knowledgeable advisor who really adds value to every interaction. So, usually, there's a history of a relationship, that there should be an understanding for the client. The lawyer should understand the leadership team, meetings, decisions, strategic initiatives, how they're moving forward. And there should be an ability for the business owner to just have access and then talk with the attorney through, high level strategic decisions, but also just like everyday tactical and execution type of decisions. So the purpose of that is to ensure that what the business owner, the business is doing is very well informed. They're reducing risks, they're aware of the risks, and they're building enterprise value through the relationship.
Yeah, it's a good point too, because knowing that business is a real asset, I would think. Rather than bringing in a lawyer when a crisis hits. If you've already got someone who understands, then you can save yourself time, money, and maybe headaches.
Yeah, I mean, usually by the time a crisis does hit, there's like a big dynamic shift, right? Like so now you're going from a posture of, proactively trying to identify and resolve business issues to be reactive after they've happened, right? So that's very different. You're, as a business owner, you lose leverage. So it's a lot harder to fix a problem if like the contract's already been signed and some sort of action's been taken. You can't go back and restructure it. And then, the dynamic is it adds expenses. You're trying to fix things or minimize the impact, and parties, they're hiring lawyers or going to court. They have damages they got to pay. It takes longer. Problems like that end up where you're being reactive to try to solve them. Those are problems that get resolved slowly. Sometimes going through the court process, as opposed to like avoiding them or minimizing them on the front end. And then, for a business owner also, they're dealing with stress and uncertainty of trying to resolve problems that might ultimately be resolved by a judge or, in some way that they didn't choose. So, we're very, pro being proactive, as opposed to reactive in terms of our general counsel roles.
Yeah, and I can also see just because of the emotional aspect of a crisis, or the mental aspect or any of that stuff, trying to bring in a lawyer cold when something happens, you're on edge, you might be a little angry depending on what's going on, and trying to build a relationship in those conditions is a heck of a lot harder than if you already have the relationship and you can bring in that person to help figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, having the familiarity, having the relationship built, having the history, having all the kind of, institutional capital, right, of having built that relationship, all those things really bring value to dealing with a crisis. Because, that at that point, this is a person you can depend on, and a person who's, been in the thick and thin with you in other situations.
So when you have an ongoing counsel relationship, what are the issues that you usually handle for clients?
I mean, the typical legal issues we handle are, things like contract review and negotiation, employment type issues, partner ownership, corporate things, business transactions. I'd say collections are a big one. Trying to reduce risks for preventing litigation. And then, we do at our firm, we handle business litigation pretty extensively. I would say also though, just and not just the good relationship pieces too are also not just about handling like legal tasks, but also big picture things like forward planning, understanding, talking through like risk tolerance and growth plans, and it's also kind of, as we've talked about, like kind of this forward looking advice and knowing like where the organization is going. So I think in the best general counsel relationships we have that dynamic as well. You're a part of where the company is going, and so that allows you to proactively address things rather than just the typical relationship is if somebody is coming and every time something goes wrong they want to call you and say, how do we handle this? But those more purpose driven relationships allow the lawyer to be kind of more part of the internal mechanisms of the company.
Yeah, I could see that. Do you have any examples of maybe, working with a business as general counsel, as outside general counsel, where you were able to help them through a crisis that maybe would have been more difficult if you weren't already there?
Oh, just one example? Yeah,
As
well,
many as you want. We've got
yeah.
time.
So I'll give you kind of the typical situations where it comes up. And so like the sort of like business emergency, right, is there's a couple things. There's like a terminated employee who's like going and calling all the clients, violating their non-compete. You might have like a rogue partner that's draining the bank account or locked somebody out of the accounts. We see a lot of businesses with like the disgruntled customer who's writing a bunch of stuff on social media that's false. And then there's the more formal stuff like, hey, we got served with a lawsuit 2 days ago and we have an emergency injunction hearing, or we got a demand letter for payment and we got 2 days to respond to it. So like all these things come up unexpectedly in a business, but for business owners, you kind of have to expect that you are a target. Like things will happen to you. So, those are some of the situations where, as attorneys who have a history with a client, we can kind of jump right in, right? So we can respond to the other side's actions. We can do things to preserve evidence, internal investigations, work with the opposing attorney, preserve status quo of the business, working with the third parties to make sure things are communicated appropriately or prepare for, emergency hearings. And so like alternatively, if a business doesn't have any of those relationships and they're gonna try to like find a lawyer in the midst of an emergency and educate them on the business and everything that's happened. Sometimes like it's very hard to even find the right person and or law firm or that firm has the availability to jump right in the way that they need to. So having that established relationship when the business crisis comes up, extremely valuable and beneficial.
How do you handle things differently when you're called in during that crisis when you don't have that relationship?
Having the relationship, you say, all right, well, like some of the benefits are, we've got a knowledge of the circumstances. We know who to communicate with in the business about it. A lot of times we're advising in real time as things are happening. So that protects the business owner. Hopefully there's a history of proactive problem solving already. So, maybe you got good contracts and procedures in place. You have employees who know to follow best practices as a result of some of the things we may have done. Having the client themselves be educated and prepared. They're not panicking because they've got their team in place. They're establishing a strategic approach. I would say just a faster response time. And so you kind of when you put all these factors together from an established relationship, that really greatly increases the chance of success. Well-informed decisions, moving quickly, intelligently, decisively. That really allows you to do those things to protect the owner and to assert their claims more successfully.
And we talked earlier about the emotional side and the side, the mental side of things. And I would imagine for you, kind of knowing what makes someone tick, like how they react to certain situations. Are they really aggressive? Are they a little more meek? Like, what is their personality? I got to believe that helps you in planning your case very, very, very much.
Absolutely. You want to be moving in tandem. I mean, obviously, you're still you still have to have a very high level of communication. You can't just assume I know the way this person's going to respond, and I'll act accordingly. You have to make sure that those things are as you believe they are through good communication, but certainly having the rapport of understanding how a client generally approaches things is so helpful. And I think it's actually the same thing for the client too. Like knowing that your attorney is dependable or that they are correct, they're diligent, having that confidence that you have the right representation is also just kind of a big piece of it from the client side, hopefully looking at us as their attorneys.
What stage do you feel a company needs someone like you as more of an outside general counsel rather than just crisis-driven legal help?
Well, like a lot of big decisions, important decisions are made, at the formation of the company, at the beginning. So things like incorporation, initial contracts, partnership, owner type agreements, and those things usually they stay in place and they dictate a lot of major decisions. So there's a good argument to say have good counsel at the outset.
Hmm.
And then from there, that's kind of the foundation of all the things that businesses do. They raise funds, they grow, they hire employees, they build functions, operations, logistics, all those things. Anywhere that there's like a new risk or a new relationship, then I think there's a benefit to doing them correctly. And also, as organizations grow, they become more complex. So that complexity as they grow compounds the risks. So it's like it's great to be there at the outset and to help make those decisions. But the need grows. It's there at the beginning, and then it increases as you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any misconceptions that business owners tend to have about using outside counsel that you'd like to take this opportunity to clear up?
One thing that happens is I think business owners get a little comfortable, like running it the way that they know how, and if things are going okay, then they feel like we must be doing everything right.
Hmm.
And a
Hmm.
lot of times it's just that the problems haven't come yet. You might be building towards a problem or kind of walking blindly. Um, Another misconception I think is that like having an attorney is only for businesses with big problems or for big companies, but in reality, I think for small businesses and medium-sized businesses, they're staying protected and they're growing maybe because they have good counsel, right? That's part of the secret of how they're getting there, not by avoiding it. So I think it's leverage to build a sustainable, successful business from the outset. It's not really something that you should do when your business gets to this level or that. And it's also, you don't want to be complacent in the way that you're doing things without having good sound advice.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And again, that not being reactive but being proactive makes a big difference in everybody's life. How do you keep the costs predictable while staying available when something urgent happens?
Well, at our law firm, we have some very specific core values related to this. So a couple of them are, we want to be optimized. So optimized mean like we want to staff matters appropriately, so they're cost effective. We want to leverage technology for the betterment of our clients. Another one is excellence. We want all of our work product to be the best it can be. And so that means, for the client, that reduces ongoing problems, it improves outcomes, and that reduces costs. Another one that we wanted, another one of our values is to actually add value to our clients with every interaction. So, it's not just about adding an expense, but it's also about really adding a value to the client themselves. And I'd say like there's one thing too that at our firm is that it's sort of subtle, but we don't have like these crazy billable hour goals that you see at a lot of firms. And so we think like this dynamic of not, of having that set up that way means that we're able to be responsive when urgency demands it because our staff and attorneys aren't just like overwhelmed with work. And it helps us to have like, you know, costs to our clients don't occur because we're pushing this like internal artificially inflated metric of performance, but instead it's really because there is a need. So I think, that dynamic internally, it's not really something that clients might see directly, but it's there, and it does make a difference to ensure that we can serve our clients quickly and responsively, and not really, push unnecessary costs.
Do people feel like, oh, if I have outside general counsel at the beginning, it's just going to cost way too much money, and I've got enough bills on my desk that I got to pay trying to get this business off the ground? Is that generally a big hang up for business owners?
It certainly is at the initial stages. We're cognizant of the fact that keeping costs low is important, especially for newer businesses getting established. At some point, reducing costs or keeping costs low is outweighed, but by the benefit of reducing risks and building systems and contracts and other sort of artifacts for a business that create value. So I think it's funny, like there's different mindsets of business owners. Some are very, very cost conscious, and that is kind of what gets them through the day. And then some are very driven by growth and pushing towards the next opportunity. And I think those type of business owners generally see having general counsel to guide them to make well-informed decisions. I think that is kind of the business owner that really understands the value of it. Not that cost conscious is a bad thing or not valuable, but I do think it is something that there just is this inflection point for business owners where they sort of flip from saying, I got to reduce every cost, to saying I got to maximize opportunities. And I think that's probably a mental hurdle for a lot of business owners.
That's a really good point. I've talked to a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, and all that, and there is a difference there between some that are just every step of the way is, we got to reduce costs here, we got to reduce costs there, we got to keep this low, we got to keep that low. And then there are other people that are, and I think I fall into this category. I have my own LLC, and I feel like I'm that person. Like, I'm okay spending the money if I know it's going to get me to a good spot. If it's going to help me grow, if it's going to avoid headaches, if it's going to, make more money in the long run, whatever that is, trying to see like the forest for the trees, I think is probably is a good way to go. But at least in my experience, I feel like most early business owners fall into that cost conscious group. Would you agree?
For sure. Oh, definitely. I mean, and it's sort of funny. It's like, as business owners, I'll say mature, but as the business grows and they make decisions and they see how things work, it's almost like a muscle that they're working out. They get more and more comfortable, hopefully over time, with just knowing, you got to spend money in your business. Mm-hmm. There are things that are expensive, and you just got to make sure you're focused more on the value that you're getting in return for that, more so than the outgoing cost. And it's easier said than done, but
it is.
But it certainly, I think, is a important leap in the development of a lot of business owners.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, and you got to prioritize, right? You got to put things into. You don't have to pay for everything right off at the front end. You can figure out what you really need and put your money towards there. But yeah, I agree with you on the maturing thing. I think that is part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff. Thanks very much, Kevin. And thank you for joining us today on the Business Owners Counsel with Kevin Brick. Having a lawyer involved before problems escalate can save you time, money, and of course, stress. And it gives owners the confidence to keep on growing. To learn more about how Kevin and his team at Brick Business Law serve as outside general counsel for Florida businesses, visit brickbusinesslaw.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave us a review. We got lots of great content coming your way. Kevin, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.